My guest today is Karl-Henrik Nilsson. Karl, how are you today?
I'm good, thank you. Very nice pronunciation. Most people butcher that, my name being Swedish.
Thank you. I've been practicing. I've been wearing my Sweden shirt too.
Oh, lovely.
You're Swedish, but you're not in Sweden, right?
No, I moved to Dubai 2.5 years ago, I think, 2 years ago.
What are you doing in Dubai?
So I work as a software architect for a GAC, Gulf Agency Company, which is a ship's husbandry and logistics company around the world. We have 8,500 people in 300 offices in 56 countries or something like that, I think. We do everything from goldfish to Formula One, and it's there's a lot of stuff going on.
Goldfish, got to be fun. So you're an architect. What exactly is an architect? What would you say you do here?
Well, I think it used to be my dream job. Like when I was a software developer. When I was a software developer, everybody were like looking up to the architect in that ivory tower and the person who got to think about all these complex problems and all the, we're going to make this run really fast. We're going to make this really memory efficient. And then somebody invented the cloud and somebody invented faster computers. And now basically what people want is to write code faster. But I don't know. I started sort of trying to map it a little bit to what it is for me. And I sort of figured out that architects work with things that give high customer satisfaction, support mergers and acquisition and constraints budgets and time, all these kind of things. Like we work with the things that are reductions in what we can build with software. And I get a lot of...
What do you mean by reductions?
So I get a lot of pushback when I talk about this, but usually people go like, "Oh yeah, I work with the scalability," and I go, "Why do you do that?" Because a lot of the times, if you come and say, "Oh, I work with high availability, I want to have good security, I want to have good testability," and I go, "Why?" Well, because usually they trail off there. But if you turn it around and say, we have identified we can make a lot of money if we have a high customer satisfaction using our app. Like it should be easy, it should feel fast. All right, well, now we have a couple of these things we can actually select. What do our customers care about? Well, they care about speed. Okay, great. So scalability is definitely in there, right? Or maybe we have, maybe we're working on like Microsoft Teams or something like that. So security becomes a thing, or being able to securely share data between people and accessibility becomes a big thing. So And I've worked a lot with these different type of companies. Then come and say, well, we care about mergers and acquisition, which is for me was very weird. But they said we are growing by buying up other companies, which is it's an existing way of doing business, right?
Sure, I happen to work for a company that does a lot of that.
Fair enough. So what you have to think about there then becomes like how do you adapt to our APIs? How are our extendability, the scalability and all these sort of things in terms of integrating with our product
with the acquired company software? That integration part becomes a priority then.
Yeah, because otherwise you're just going to have these islands of software of companies who can't work together, and that's. Well, I mean, you gave a very, very good example. Microsoft is really good at buying up companies and actually integrating with them, right? They become part of products. But on the other hand, they have a lot of products you can make people part of.
Okay. So going through this experience and thinking about things in the ways of what's value, will that change your perception of what is an architect? Is that right?
Well, yeah, because when I started work as an architect back in 2014, I think, 13. I got my first architect gig.
Over 10 years.
Yeah. I was a bit bummed. I thought it was going to be this really fun project, but mostly was sort of like sitting around taking responsibility and decisions and things like that. And that's, I think, sort of when I started more to think about what am I actually contributing, because it delivered that kind of purpose to my work. Then I also, of course, noticed that when I came to the business side and asked, hey, what do you need? Do you need high customer satisfaction? Are you focusing on mergers and acquisition? Do you have a constrained budget and time? Usually what they say is, yep, we have all of that.
Everything's a priority.
Yeah. So I had to learn and work with that. But over the years, I sort of designed this way that I call software archaeology. Because a lot of the times you work with a startup or someone who is new in the business, they don't have this problem with legacy. But on the other hand, they are not the type of people that I would use to work with, both as a consultant and then later when I went to work for Microsoft. I came in and got to work with these usually very, very successful companies. Like they were making a lot of money and had been for many years, but built on top of a software architecture that perhaps had been a little bit or quite a lot neglected over the years. And that's sort of like where this talk comes from as well, where we started talking about how do you get to where you get to make all these fun architectural stuff? Like where do we get to talk about scalability and fault tolerance and whatever it is that is important to the business, so that you get to have fun at work rather than sitting there and, oh, we have this WPF application and nobody touched for the last 10 years that we need to sort of update to be able to pass an audit.
Well, fun is important in my job. I agree with that. And I also, something that said resonated with me was that companies are not often thinking about the architecture of their software, what their systems are, because that's not their core business. Their core business is shipping cars and goldfish or whatever it is. Software is just one tool, one of many, many tools in their toolbox. And so spending money to improve the software architecture doesn't directly drive revenue.
No, exactly. And if they don't have the help from someone who can come in and actually explain to them, either a consultant or their staff or trusted vendors that can come in and explain why they should invest in this, I mean, what's the point?
Right.
They're not going to do it because
they're not going to modernize just to modernize. There need to be some benefit in it. Absolutely.
Yeah. I don't know how many times I've heard managers say, "Oh, but that's just doing tech for tech's sake."
Right.
Or some version.
Sometimes they have a point.
Yeah, absolutely. Like that's where you have to be able to, come and talk about the business side of things, like, or to be able to. And I do a lot of talk about being successful in the software industry, and I think that's one of those things that if you want to be very successful in IT these days, you need to be able to provide like a business perspective. Right.
Yeah. You off camera, you're talking about something called an application portfolio. Tell me about that.
Okay, so when I started working a lot, especially when I moved to Microsoft, and we started meeting a lot of companies that struggled with keeping track of their but maybe they had worked for 25 years, 30 years. They had a lot of application in production. Some had source code, some had not. Some had been updated 15 years ago. People had left. There were not a lot of information about it. So I started looking for how can we solve this? And I met a lot of companies who were providing something that they called application portfolio software suites, which are usually very, very expensive, usually very heavily recommended by various enterprise organizations and things like that. And I tried a bunch of them, and I paid way too much money for a bunch of them. And I realized that I've now found the ultimate application portfolio mapping toolkit. Because what an application portfolio is, it's literally just a map of what do you have in production. Like
it's an inventory.
It's an inventory, exactly. It's a name, it's a description. It comes maybe with with the properties and the metadata you need. So I tend to capture things like name, description, business owner, technical owner, status, life cycle stage, maybe a little bit about the hosting. Do we have tests? What's the tech stack? Who are the primary users? But there's a couple of really important things here. Specifically, who are the people that manage this, and what does it cost to run it? There's a lot of people forget this. What does it cost to run one application? Usually I go to someone and they have 25 applications in production. They go, yeah, we spend $1.6 million of cloud costs every year. All right. Is that a lot? Is that a little? Depending on, and they go yeah, exactly. It depends. But they forget that to keep this running, they have to hire 28 support people to sort of do data fixes every single day, because their software keeps breaking or keep messing up stuff, and you have to sort of also figure out what are the actual cost of running this application and how much money are we making for it, because then we can take decisions. So
Right.
at the end of the day, an application portfolio is a tool that helps us take decision what to do with something. So I want to tell you a little bit before we continue about how to build one of these. I want to tell you because everybody can follow along them, because everybody already has installed the best application portfolio mapping tool in the world on their computer, which is Microsoft Excel.
Excel. I was just going to suggest that.
Yeah.
Rows and columns.
It
When
beats-
you described all those properties, I thought, well, that sounds like rectangular data to me.
Absolutely. No, but it beats all the other tools. Like it genuinely, like all the other tools. Okay, but can I do programming in this? I go, no. Can I do data collection in this? Can I integrate with Power BI automatically? It's like, no, that's kind of hard. Okay, can I get Azure? No, sorry, Entra. It's Entra ID these days, right?
Yeah.
Can I get Entra
Azure
ID
Active Directory.
information in? And they go like, no, not really. And so, sorry, Excel wins every day, hands down. And I'm sure I'm going to get some angry email again, because there's definitely tools out there that sort of help you. But if you don't have an application portfolio, just start using Excel, map it down.
Right.
And so usually what I do, like the first week as a consultant, if I'm there to help people with this, is just, okay, name all your applications.
Right.
And people will forget stuff. So you start
you need
talking
to write it down. You need to record this.
Yeah. And you sort of like, you talk to the people who run hosting, and they know about some services people forgot. And you go like, okay, which application do they belong to? Well, they're sort of in between. And you start really writing this map down, right? And you do a little bit of a description. Now, the first really important thing is that you do an Azure Entra ID synchronization to a separate table in Excel, which is kept up to date. So now you can do drop downs. You never type in. That's one of my rules to make this work. You never type in a name. You have a drop down to select it, because if that person leaves, now I can validate that this field is actually wrong. But there's no Alice. I don't know.
Alice doesn't work here anymore.
Yeah, exactly. Alice doesn't work here anymore. She went, right, and she's replaced by Janice or something like that. Okay, so we need to update that, because otherwise we're going to end up with applications that are orphaned. So it's one of those very, very simple things you can do, is to make sure everyone has a business owner, everybody has a technical owner, because then you have one person that cares from the business side, and you have one person that cares from the technical side.
Okay. So you've got these applications. You know what they are, and because they exist, I think of them as legacy applications. Now, as an architecture, you need to modify what's out there already. So if some of these things are custom applications,
Yeah.
you're dealing with those. What's
So-
the role of an architect in that?
Well, when you say legacy application, what do you mean?
Anything that wasn't written by me. Well, I distinguish it from greenfield applications, something that a brand new doesn't exist. Somebody comes in and says, hey, I need you to build this thing for me. We don't have it. Starting from scratch, I get to choose everything. That's usually, when I was a consultant, it never worked that way. It was always, we have an application, it's broken, you need to fix it, or it's we need to add new features to it.
Yeah.
And so I have to work with what's already there. I have to understand what's already there.
Yeah, and my issue with this is that whenever you say legacy to a software developer, it's it means something, and to what I've seen in a lot of teams is that when you say legacy, it means low quality. It absolutely doesn't have to mean that. You're right? Because it can mean absolutely brilliantly written code that we wrote a long time ago.
Right.
So when you say legacy to someone, suddenly that has an implication. It may mean that people will write the code differently, they will treat it differently, they will feel differently when they work with it.
Okay.
I usually talk about this. So usually when I go to conferences, I talk in front of people. Usually I get a slot late in the evening or something. Like if I get a late in the evening slot, I talk about things like, well, what about beer? And I pick like some local beer flavor. So if I'm in Belgium, I go like, hey, I'd never had a triple dark ale thing, and they go, well, but now I know. And people go, yeah, now you know. And then you sort of come back, but actually I didn't say anything. If you like that beer, you probably think I liked it. But if you don't like it, you probably think I don't like it because I didn't give you any information. And legacy is the same thing. It doesn't give you any information. It just sort of makes you believe things that might not be true. So I always tell people to write a legacy software definition. And for me, legacy software means it has a date when we're going to remove it.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah. So if you're gonna call something legacy in my shop, then I'll tell you, okay, absolutely, perfectly fine. Give me a date when I can delete it, because if you're calling it legacy, I'm gonna start working for getting rid of it. Because otherwise, it is production software, and we're gonna treat it as production software. And that works really well for me. Might not work really well for others, but I tend to have like a life cycle stage for all applications that I work with, which is like, if it's legacy, then the life cycle stage for me tends to be retire. Like, can we figure out like what data do we need from this? What features do we need from these that we can move to something else? Otherwise, usually I have maintain, modernize, or improve, so that you have like these different things that you're trying to do. So if something is on maintain, usually I get very little information about it and just put it down into the portfolio, like a little bit about the tech stack, how are we hosting it, where are we hosting it, what does it cost to run, and how strategic is it? It's like, because they're usually in most companies, you probably heard the term back office.
Uh-huh.
And that's also one of those terms that I try to avoid, because it sort of gives people the implication that it's less strategic. But in a lot of the cases, you have like your ERP system, your CRM system is sitting there, and that might be exactly how you communicate with customers.
Could be very strategic, yes.
So that's why I try to also put like a little bit of how strategic important is this tool. And you sort of, you write it down there and, look a little bit into if it's redundant.
You used the phrase software archaeology earlier. What do you mean by that?
So, tell you the truth, a lot of it I use because it sounds funny. It gets me into conferences.
Okay.
But it's also
works.
because, it works, right? We met in a few conferences over the last year. But I use software archaeology because a lot of the times when you come to these software companies that have been very successful, but now, or sorry, not software companies, we come to these companies that have software that have been very successful in their business, and now they want to dig into something. Usually it becomes very much like, if you want to be successful in this, you have to treat it very much like you're doing archaeology. Like, you're looking at it and, should I dig this up, or is it like one of those dangerous things that I should leave in the ground? So the portfolio for me is part of that mapping, right? We start to map out a little bit an understanding. So I think I shared a document with you before, which is how I do my my archaeology digs. When I found an application that we're going to keep this around for some time, right? And that's when I sort of dig into this, and I have a template for it that we use. So it includes, first of all, just basic information that a lot of the time people don't have about their own applications. Yeah. Like if I go and ask you, hey, this tool, what's the initial release date? When did we start working on that? And they go, I don't know. What's the last known update? I don't know. Where's the source code? I don't know. How is it hosted? Like, I don't know. And you start going like, whoa. And this is in production? Yeah. Well, and then I sort of have this whole list of deployment and configurations, code and build, team and ownership. I go through dependencies and integration, logging and monitoring, documentation, knowledge, trying to find these knowledge gaps, the business context, of course. And then I try to end with a proper recommendation of what do we do now? So that's kind of fun. And I learned over the years that so I used to start by interviewing people.
Okay.
And now I stopped doing that almost entirely. So now if I do these workshops now, it tends to be the last step. Now I try to get access to like hosting environments. Okay, if you don't have the source code, can I check the server where it's at? Is it a VM? Like can I actually get to look at it? Because from there, you can use some normal commands, dir ls and all that to figure out, okay, what was the first file that was ever written here? When was the last time a file was written? And you get a lot of that information going, because then you can go and interview people, and you can ask them questions. So I saw that the last time somebody updated this was the 5th of June 1999. Yeah, I remember that, because you sort of jog their memories, because otherwise you just sit in these meetings and people going, oh, I don't remember. I have no idea.
So it's more efficient that way. You also know what you don't know. If you start looking at things and you gather information, then you can realize, oh, I know this information, but I don't know where the source code is, for example.
Exactly. And I found, like, if you have a little bit of, like, I don't know what to call it, but little hangers for people can sort of attach their information that they have to,
Right.
they remember so much more. And these workshops become much more useful. Because you can go and say, okay, this application is called so-and-so, it's hosted there and there on this IP. Oh, I remember that. We did, and you sort of, you jog their memories a little bit.
Okay. So you have all this information, and then as an architect, what are you going to do with all that information?
So what I want to get that information to is a decision. Like I want it to be an outcome of some sort. Like, do we modernize it, or usually at this point we have figured out that we want to keep it around somehow. So now it's more like, what do we focus on? Because normally I try to say, you don't know what a yes is, right? Like when somebody says, oh, do you want to invest in this application? Yes, I do. How much? And all these sort of questions. And you don't know what a yes is. You need to sort of figure out, how much do we actually want to put in this? How much use are we actually? How much would it actually cost to get it to that state? I used to refer to this in software archaeology and dating. You don't know what a yes is, but you definitely know what a no is. So when people come to me and say, like, yeah, but what if it would cost $1 million to get this to a state where you can, successfully run it in production? Well, then, forget about it. We're just going to go and buy some tool or something.
Right.
Okay, great. Then we know we're going to keep it under $1 million. How much under $1 million? And you get then we're back to these that we talked about before, like the restrictions. So because we have restrictions, we can actually figure out, what are we going to do with this? So maybe the best thing is to get rid of it, because it has, license costs and running costs and, the way that it works at the moment.
Sure. You may want to adjust what your expectations are. Everyone wants, 5 nines of uptime, 6 nines of uptime.
Oh, yeah.
That's fine, but it may cost all the money you have in order to get there.
Yeah. But I mean, did people even
calculate three nines? Yeah, and 3 nines, 2 nines might be fine. It depends on what it's doing.
But because it's also like you go to these companies, and I'm sure because you work for Microsoft, you still work for Microsoft. You worked there for a long time. But I mean, you go there and people go like, "Oh, we have 5 nines." Really? You have one server in the basement of the office. Like I don't think that means what you think it means. Yeah, for the last year, you haven't had any stops, but you also haven't updated your code. You haven't made any deployments, and you've basically been lucky. And it's a great point, right? Like, you have to sort of figure out like what you need for that. But my next step typically is, because usually we're preparing to do something with this application. Like, we've decided that we want to keep it around, most likely, unless we stick to the $1 million restriction or something like that. So the next step for me is usually make it easy for the developers to modernize it. Like, if I come across anything that needs to be fixed, I map it out. I learn a lot about this. So I tend to draw a lot of architectural diagrams. I'm a big fan of Simon Brown's C4 architecture. If you haven't heard of it, you've probably heard of it.
I'll put a link. I'll look for it and put a link in the show notes.
Yeah, c4model.com. Because it gives you this possibility to have one helicopter view that you can click yourself in, and there's a bunch of different people who've written really good tooling around it. I use Structurizer. You get these nice clickable diagrams. So you can have one thing where you talk to people at one level of the organization, and you can have like code or components level when you're talking to other people. And then also I tend to, by the way, C4 architecture has these coded languages like Markdown, sort of. It's more advanced than Markdown, but it allows you to source control or architecture. So all architecture diagrams become source controlled and version controlled, which is, absolutely
That's really
fantastic.
nice. Yeah, then you can keep the architecture with the code that implements that architecture.
And you can also do a little trick that I like, which is that you can check how often it gets updated in the source code. So you can actually ping people automatically and say, "Hey, have you forgotten your software architecture diagrams? Maybe have you?" So that's very helpful. The second thing I do is that I really like ADRs, and normally ADRs is something you do at the start of a project.
ADR is
so architectural decision records, basically what happened. So it's like let's say that you and I work on a project, and we wanna decide if we want to use Entity Framework or Dapper for our ORM thing for our application, right? So we go through all the nits and things, and then we decide, okay, we're going to use Dapper because we don't think it's going to be complex enough that we want to invest in Entity Framework, or we know Dapper better or something like that. So then we write an ADR. And an ADR is a super simple markdown thing that includes, in my case, title, status, context, decision, and consequences. That's all. There's a guy called Michael Nygaard who has this absolutely delicious little template that you can go in and pick up. And when you have these meetings with people, usually they tell you about all these crazy stories and reasons and things that happened, why things are now the way they are. So I tend to just posthumously write ADRs. So you can come back and you can see, oh, so this is the reason why we're using a database that, costs an arm and a leg, or this is the reason why we are not using the tool. Right? I found ADRs in projects that I come back to that I worked for when I started using ADRs, and it goes like, people go, why are we not using this framework or that framework? And we go like, well, because it didn't exist when we took the decision. It's very, very nice kind of discussion that we're in.
Interesting. Yeah, I do a lot of architecture design sessions, which are more proactive at the beginning of the project. But you're talking about the R is for review. This is to But I would about the decisions that were made in the past.
Absolutely, but I would probably use ADRs in that kind of workshop more today. It's better to document the decisions that we take rather than the ones that were taken, because that's guesswork. I usually put in a little bit of a comment that this ADR was written by someone who weren't there to take the decision, but we think this is the reason, or something like that. But after that, if we take new decisions, we're going to change this or we're going to update this. They're very, very nice to have.
When you're talking about working with legacy software, even just existing software, or actually even with new software, technical debt comes up all the time, and that's a big part of architectural decisions. How do you think about that?
Yeah, so usually one of the questions that we ask when we do these kind of workshops or when we're working with different teams is any debt due? Like, what kind of debt do you have? And because people tend to talk about technical debt, which is code level and architectural related shortcuts to me. But to be honest, you have, a lot of different types of debt. You have technical debt, documentation debt, like missing or outdated, inadequate documentation, knowledge debt, stuff, nobody who wrote this piece of software is still in the company. You may have security debt, like maybe you need to pass an audit or something like that. Will your application pass it? Or just operational debt. Maybe there's no monitoring, or maybe there's no, deployment tools or CI/CD and that sort of stuff. So usually I try to figure out where is our debt and what debt do we have to pay today, so you get the right debt paid off, rather than focusing on poorly written code that's been around for 20 years and probably will work fine.
Food for thought. I'm thinking about debt in ways that I hadn't thought of it before. Thanks. Karl, we are just about at time. Do you have an online presence that you can share?
Oh, yeah, I do. I have a blog that I write occasionally, especially when I've done talks and upload slides and templates and things like that. So you can find some of this information there. It's karl-henrik.se.
Excellent. Well, Karl, I've learned a lot today. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks for having me. Hi, friends. I'm here with David talking about how technology, and specifically old technology, can still be fun. Hope you enjoyed listening.